I woke up to the sound of crunching leaves beneath my feet. The air was thick with the scent of pine and cedar. I looked around, taking in my surroundings. I wasn't sure where I was or how I had gotten there. The last thing I remembered was driving down a remote highway, somewhere in the backwoods of Georgia. I had been on my way to visit a friend who lived in a small cabin in the middle of nowhere. But something happened along the way, something that I couldn't quite recall. I looked down at my clothes, which were dirty and torn. I had scratches on my arms and legs, and my head was pounding. I tried to remember what had happened, but my mind was fuzzy. I decided to start walking, hoping that I would come across something familiar. But the deeper I got into the woods, the more lost I became. The trees were tall and dense, blocking out any sunlight. The air was damp and cold. As I wandered through the woods, I began to hear strange noises. It sounded like something was following me, rustling in the bushes and snapping twigs underfoot. But every time I turned around, there was nothing there. I kept walking, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew that something was wrong. The woods were too quiet, too still. And then I heard it, the scream. It was blood-curdling and came from somewhere deep within the woods. I froze, unsure of what to do. My instinct was to run, but I didn't know where to go. So I continued on, hoping that I would figure it out. And then I saw her. She was a young woman, with long dark hair and a torn dress. She looked like she had been through a war, her arms and legs covered in scars. But it was her eyes that scared me the most. They were vacant, as if she had lost her mind. I tried to talk to her, but she didn't respond. She just kept walking. I was always someone who loved being out in nature. The sounds of the birds chirping, the leaves rustling in the trees, and the fresh air were all things that made me feel at peace. So when my friends invited me on a camping trip in the backwoods of Virginia, I was more than happy to accept. Little did I know that this trip would turn out to be the most terrifying experience of my life. We arrived at the campsite on Friday afternoon. The location was secluded, surrounded by dense woods on all sides. We set up our tents and started a campfire. Everything was going great. We shared stories, drank beer, and roasted marshmallows. As the night went on, we could hear the sounds of crickets and other creatures in the woods around us. All of us settled in our sleeping bags and were ready to go to bed. I was dozing off, but something woke me up. It sounded like footsteps. I sat up in my tent and listened carefully. The footsteps were getting closer, but I couldn't see anything outside my tent. I assumed it was just an animal, so I tried to go back to sleep. But the noise continued. It was getting louder and sounding like multiple footsteps. I grew increasingly nervous and thought about waking my friends up. Suddenly, the noise stopped. Dead silence surrounded us, and my heart was pounding. I tried to calm down, telling myself I was overreacting, and finally managed to doze off. The next day, we went hiking in the woods. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining through the trees, and we could hear the sound of a nearby river. We came across a clearing, and a cabin was in the distance. We decided to explore a little and see if anyone was around. As we got closer, it became clear that it seemed abandoned. There were boards on the windows, and the door was locked. But oddities are always alluring, and we decided to venture into the woods a bit more. The woods are a place where you can easily get lost, so we took all the necessary precautions and marked our path with arrows made of sticks. Hours had passed as we leisurely walked, chatting and joking, until we grew tired. We made camp by a small stream, filled our water bottles, and built another fire. We had our tents pitched and were feeling pretty good about ourselves for our amateur camping prowess. As the night fell, we sat by the fire, sipping beers and telling ghost stories. We were all having a great time, but there was something in the air that made me uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. It's hard to explain the feeling of being watched or followed, but I could feel it deep down. Suddenly, we heard a sound coming from the woods. It was too loud to be an animal. It was human-like. It sounded like someone was whispering or chanting in some forgotten language. We were all scared, and our bodies were tense. Fear had taken over as we looked at each other, trying to make sense of what happened. As the chanting continued, we could now see the outlines of people in the woods. It was like they were surrounding us, and they seemed to be getting closer. They were dark, shadowy figures, and we could hear them muttering strange gibberish. We were frozen. We had no idea what to do or where to go. That's when I realized something. We had never marked our way back to the campsite. We were lost. The group of shadowy figures was now upon us, chanting and muttering louder and louder. It was clear by now that they were not human. They were something else, something from beyond this world. The figures had long, bony fingers and eyes so dark they seemed to suck the light out of the air around them. Their skins were pale white and almost had a sheen that reflected the light from the fire. The creatures were surrounding us, closing in, and we knew we were trapped. We had to fight. We had no choice. It was either fight or be consumed by fear and die a horrible death. One of my friends grabbed a stick from the fire and lunged at the creature's chest. It reeled back, screeching in some unearthly language. That was the moment that broke the spell. We all started fighting, defending ourselves with everything we had. We fought with our fists, sticks, rocks, and anything else we could find. We fought like animals, and eventually. I never thought I would be the type of person to venture into the deep woods alone, but after a recent breakup and feeling the need to clear my head, I knew it was now or never. Armed with just a backpack, some supplies, and my trusty camping knife, I set out into the wilderness. The first day's hike was uneventful. I set up my tent and started a fire, roasting a rabbit I had caught earlier. The stars were bright above me, and the sounds of the forest lulled me into a sense of peace. But that didn't last long. As I was getting ready to turn in for the night, I heard something rustling in the bushes. I immediately froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to tell myself it was just a raccoon or a deer, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That's when I saw it. A pair of glowing eyes, staring straight at me from the shadows. I couldn't tell what kind of animal it was, but I knew it wasn't anything I wanted to mess with. I grabbed my knife and prepared for the worst, but the eyes disappeared just as quickly as they had appeared. I didn't sleep much that night, constantly on edge and feeling like I was being watched. The next day, things started to get more intense. As I was hiking along the river, I heard a faint whisper calling my name. I stopped dead in my tracks, thinking I was just hearing things. But then I heard it again, louder this time. I turned around, scanning the trees for any sign of another person, but there was nobody there. I tried to shake off the feeling,